Hare Krishna. Welcome to Books to Krishna. I hope you all liked the first episode of Leela Mrit, which is the biography of His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. Today we are going to do episode 2, which is chapter 1 of volume 1, which talks about the childhood of Prabhupada. This book has been written by Satswarup Das Goswami, and all rights of the book rest with the Bhaktivedanta Book Trust. With the grace of Prabhupada, we shall proceed with the chapter 1, which reflects his childhood. Hare Krishna. We would be sleeping, and father would be doing arti. Ding, ding, ding. We would hear the bell and wake up and see him bowing down before Krishna. This is what Srila Prabhupada says at the starting of the chapter number 1. It was Janmashtami, the annual celebration of the advent of Lord Krishna, some 5,000 years before. Residents of Calcutta, mostly Bengalis and other Indians, but also many Muslims and even some British, were observing the festive day, moving here and there through the city street to visit the temples of Lord Krishna. Devout Vaishnavas, fasting until midnight, chanted Hare Krishna and heard about the birth and activities of Lord Krishna from Srimad Bhagavatam. They continued fasting, chanting, and worshipping throughout the night. The next day, September 1, 1896, in a little house in the Tollygunge suburb of Calcutta, a male child was born. Since he was born on Nandotsav, the day Krishna's father, Nand Maharaj, had observed a festival in honor of Krishna's birth. The boy's uncle called him Nandulal, but his father, Gaur Mohan De, and his mother, Rajani, named him Abhecharan, one who is fearless, having taken shelter at Lord Krishna's lotus feet. In accordance with Bengali tradition, the mother had gone to the home of her parents for the delivery, and so it was that on the bank of the Adi Ganga, a few miles from his father's home, in a small town room, mud walled house with a tiled roof underneath a jackfruit tree, Abhay Charan was born. A few days later, Abhay returned with his parents to their home at 151 Harrison Road. An astrologer did a horoscope for the child, and the family was made jubilant by the auspicious reading. The astrologer made a specific prediction. When this child reached the age of 70, he would cross across the ocean, become a great exponent of religion, and open 108 temples. Abhay De was born into an India dominated by Victorian imperialism. Calcutta was the capital of India, the seat of the viceroy, the Earl of Elgin and Kincardine, and the second city of the British Empire. Europeans and Indians lived separately, although in business and education they intermingled. The British lived mostly in central Calcutta, amidst their own theatres, racetracks, cricket fields, and fine European buildings. The Indians lived more in the North Calcutta. Here the men dressed in dhotis and women in saris while remaining loyal to the British Crown, followed their traditional religion and culture. Abbay's home at 151 Harrison Road was in the Indian section of North Calcutta. Abbay's father, Gaur Mohan De, was a cloth merchant of moderate income and belonged to the aristocratic Suravanik merchant community. He was related, however, to the wealthy Malik family, which for hundreds of years had traded in gold and salt with the British. Originally, Maliks had been members of the De family, a Gotra lineage that traces back to the ancient sage Gautam. But during the Mughal period of pre British India, a Muslim ruler had conferred the title of Malik, Lord, on a wealthy, influential branch of the Deys. Then, several generations later, a daughter of the Deys had married into the Malik family, and the two families had remained close ever since. An entire block of properties on either side of Harrison Road belonged to Loknath Malik, and Gaur Mohan and his family lived in a few rooms of a three-storied building within the Malik properties. Across the street from the Deys residence was a Radha Govind temple where for the past 150 years the Maliks had maintained worship of the deity of Radha Krishna. Various shops on the Malik properties provided income for the deity and for the priests conducting the worship. Every morning before breakfast, Malik family members would visit the temple to see the deity of Radha Govind. They would offer cooked rice, kachoris, and vegetables on a large platter and would then distribute the prasadam to the deity's morning visitors from the neighborhood. Among the daily visitors was Abhay Charan, accompanying his mother, father, or servant. Srila Prabhupada said, I used to ride on some perambulator with Siddheshwar Malik. He used to call me Moti, Pearl, and his nickname was Subiddhi. And the servant pushed us together. If one day his friend did not see me, he would become mad. He would not go in the perambulator without me. We would not separate even for a moment. As the servant pushed the baby carriage into the wide expanse of Harrison Road, timing his crossing between the bicycles and horse drawn hackies. The two children in the pram gazed up at the fair sky and tall trees across the road. Sounds and sights of the hackies with their large wheels spinning over the road caught the fascinated attention of the two children. The servant steered the carriage towards the arched gateway within the red sandstone wall bordering the Radha Govind Mandir. And as Abhay and his friend rode underneath the ornate metal arch and into the courtyard, they saw high above them two stone lions, the heralds and protectors of the temple compound, their right paws extended. In the courtyard was a circular drive, and on the oval lawn were lampposts with gas lights and a statue of a young woman in robes. Sharply creeping sparrows flitted in the shrubs and trees or hopped across the grass, pausing to peck the ground, while the chores of pigeons cooed, sometimes abruptly, flapping their wings overhead, sailing off to another perch or descending to the courtyard. Voices chattered as Bengalis moved to and fro, dressed in simple cotton saris and white dhotis. Sometimes someone paused by the carriage to amuse the golden skinned boys with their shining dark eyes, but most people were passing by quickly, going into the temple. The heavy double door leading into the inner courtyard were open, and the servant eased the carriage wheels down a foot deep step and proceeded through the foyer, then down another step and into the bright sunlight of the main courtyard. There they faced the stone statue of Garuda, perched on a 4 foot column. Their carrier this carrier of Vishnu, Garuda, half man, half bird, kneeled on one knee, his hands folded prayerfully, his eagle beak strong, and his wings poised behind him. The carriage moved ahead, past two servants, sweeping and washing the stone courtyard. It was just a few paces across the courtyard to the temple. The temple area itself, open like a pavilion, was a raised platform with a stone roof supported by stout pillars 15 feet tall. At the left end of the temple pavilion stood a crowd of worshippers, viewing the duties on the altar. The servant pushed the carriage closer, lifting the two boys out, and then, holding their hands, escorted them reverently before the deities. Shri La Prabhupada said, I can remember standing at the doorway of Radha Govind temple, saying prayers to Radha Govind Murti. I would watch for hours together. The deity was so beautiful with his slanted eyes. Radha Govind, freshly bathed and dressed, now stood on their silver throne amidst vases of fragrant flowers. Govinda was about 18 inches high, and Radha Rani, standing on his left, was slightly smaller. Both were golden. Radha and Govind both stood in the same graceful curved dancing pose. Right leg bent at the knee and right foot placed in front of the left. Radha Rani, dressed in a lustrous silk sari, held up her reddish right palm in benediction, and Krishna, in his silk jacket and dhoti, played on the golden flute. At Govind's lotus feet were green tulsi leaves with pulp of sandalwood hanging around their lordship's neck, and reaching down almost to their lotus feet were several garlands of fragrant night blooming jasmines, delicate trumpet like blossoms resting lightly on Radha and Govind's divine form. Their necklace of gold pearls and diamond shimmered. Radharani's bracelets were of gold, and both she and Krishna wore gold embroidered silk chadars and about their shoulders. The flowers in their hands and hair were small and delicate, and the silver crowns on their heads were bedecked with jewels. Radha and Krishna were slightly smiling, beautifully dressed, dancing on their silver throne beneath a silver canopy and surrounded by flowers. To Abe, they appeared most attractive. Life outside on Harrison Road and beyond was forgotten. In the courtyard, the birds went on chirping, and visitors came and went, but Abhay stood silently, absorbed on seeing the beautiful form of Krishna and Radharani, the Supreme Lord and his eternal consort. Then the kirtan began, devotees chanting and playing on the drums and kartals. Abhay and his friend kept watching as the pujaris offered incense, its curling smoke hanging in the air, then a flaming lamp, a conch shell, a handkerchief, flowers, a whisk, and a peacock fan. Finally, the pujaris blew the conch shell loudly, and the Aarti ceremony was over. When Abe was 1.5 years old, he fell ill with typhoid. The family physician, Dr. Bose, prescribed chicken booth. No, Gaur Mohan protested. I cannot allow it. Yes, otherwise he will die. But we are not meat eaters, Gaur Mohan pleaded. We cannot prepare chicken in our kitchen. Don't mind, Dr. Bose said. I shall prepare it at my home and bring it in a jar and use simply. Gaur Mohan assented. If it is necessary for my son to live. So the doctor came with his chicken broth and offered it to Abhay, who immediately began to vomit. All right, the doctor admitted. Never mind, this is no good. Gaur Mohan then threw the chicken broth away, and Abe gradually recovered from the typhoid without having to eat meat. On the roof of Abhe's maternal grandmother's house was a little garden with flowers, greenery, and trees. Along with the other grandchildren, 2-year old Abhe took pleasure in watering the plants with A sprinkling can, but his particular tendency was to sit alone amongst the plants. He would find a nice bush and make a sitting place. One day, when Abe was 3, he narrowly escaped a fatal burning. He was playing with matches in front of his house when he caught his cloth on fire. Suddenly, a man appeared and put the fire out. Abe was saved, although he retained a small scar on his leg. In 1900, when Abe was 4, a vehement plague hit Calcutta. Dozens of people died every day, and thousands evacuated the city. When there seemed no way to check the plague, an old Babaji organized Hare Krishna Sankirtan all over Calcutta, regardless of religion. Hindu, Muslim, Christian, and Parsis all joined, and a large party of chanters traveled from street to street, door to door, chanting the name of Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. The group arrived at Gaur Mohan's house at 151 Harrison Road, and Gaur Mohan eagerly received them. Although Abe was a little child, his head reaching only up to the knees of the chanters, he also joined in the dancing. Shortly after this, the plague subsided. Gaur Mohan was a pure Vaishnava, and he raised his son to be Krishna conscious. Since his own parents had also been Vaishnavas, Gaur Mohan had never touched meat, fish, eggs, or coffee. His complexion was fair and his disposition reserved. At night, he would lock up his clothes shop, set a bowl of rice in the middle of the floor to satisfy the rats so that they would not chew the cloth in their hunger, and return home. Therefore, he would read from Chaitanya Charitamrita and Srimad Bhagavatam, the main scriptures of Bengali Vaishnavas, chant on his japa beads, and worship the deity of Lord Krishna. He was gentle and affectionate and would never punish Abhay. Even when obliged to correct him, Gaur Mohan would first apologize. You are my son, so now I must correct you. It is my duty. Even Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's father was chastised him, so don't mind. Srila Prabhupada said, my father's income was no more than 250 rupees, but there was no question of need. In the mango season, when we were children, we would run through the house playing and we would grab mangoes as we were running through. And all through the day, we would eat mangoes. We wouldn't have to think, can I have a mango? My father always provided food. Mangoes were 1 rupee a dozen. Life was simple, but there was always plenty. We were middle class, but received 4 or 5 guests daily. My father gave 4 daughters in marriage, and there was no difficulty for him. Maybe it was not a very luxurious life, but there was no scarcity of food or shelter or cloth. Daily he purchased 2.5 kilograms of milk. He did not like to purchase retail but would purchase a year's supply of coal by the cartload. We were happy, not that because we did not purchase a motor car, we were unhappy. My father used to say, God has 10 hands. If we want to take away from you with 2 hands, how much can you protest? And when he wants to give you with 10 hands, then with your 2 hands, how much can you take? My father would rise a little late, around 7 or 8. Then, after taking bath, he would go purchasing. Then, from 10 o'clock to 1 in the afternoon, he was engaged in puja. Then, he would take his lunch and go to business. And in the business shop, he would take a little rest for 1 hour. He would come home from business at 10 o'clock at night, and then again he would do puja. Actually, his real business was puja. For livelihood, he did some business, but puja was his main business. We would be sleeping, and father would be doing aarti, ding, ding, ding. We would hear the bell and wake up and see him bowing down before Krishna. Gaur Mohan wanted Vaishnava goals for his son. He wanted Abhay to become a servant of Radharani, to become a preacher of the Bhagavatam, and to learn the devotional art of playing mridang. He regularly received sadhus in his home, and he would always ask them, "Please bless my son so that Shrimati Radharani may be pleased with him and grant him her blessings." Enjoying each other's company, father and son used to walk as far as 10 miles, saving the 5 paisa tram fare. On the beach, they used to see a yogi who for years had sat in one spot without moving. One day, the yogi's son was sitting there and people had gathered round. The son was talking over his father's sitting place. Gaur Mohan gave the yogi a donation and asked their blessing for his son. When Abhay's mother said she wanted him to become a British lawyer when he grew up, which meant he would have to go to London to study, one of Malik's uncle thought it was a good idea, but Gaur Mohan would not hear of it. If Abhay went to England, he would be influenced by European dress and manners. He would learn drinking and woman hunting. Gaur Mohan objected. "I do not want his money." From the beginning of Abhay's life, Gaur Mohan had introduced his plan. He had hired a professional mridang player to teach Abhay the standard rhythms for accompanying kirtan. Rajni had been skeptical. What is the purpose of teaching such a young child to play mridang? It is not important. But Gaur Mohan had his dreams of a son who would grow up singing bhajans, playing mridang, and speaking on Shrimad Bhagavatam. When Abhay sat to play the mridang, even with his left and right arms extended as far as he could, his small hands would barely reach the drum heads at the opposite end of the drum. With his right wrist, he would flick his hand just as his teacher instructed, and his fingers would make a high pitched sound, teeny teeny ta, and then he would strike the light drumhead with his open left hand, boom boom. With practice and age, he was gradually learning the basic rhythms, and Gaur Mohan looked on with pleasure. Abhay was an acknowledged pet child of both his parents. In addition to his childhood names Moti, Nandulal, Nandu, and Kocha, his grandmother called him Kachori Mukhi because of his fondness for kachores, spicy vegetables, stuffed fried pastries popular in Bengal. Both his grandmother and mother would give him kachoris, which he kept in the many pockets of his little vest. He liked to watch the vendors cooking on the busy roadside and accept kachoris from them and from the neighbors until all inside and outside pockets of his vest were filled. Sometime when Abhay demanded that his mother make him kachoris, she would refuse. Once she even sent him to bed when Gaur Mohan came home and asked, "Where is Abhay?" Rajni explained how he had become too demanding and she had sent him to bed without kachoris. No one should make them for him. His father replied, and he woke Abe and personally cooked puris and kachoris for him. Gaur Mohan was always lenient with Abe and careful to see that his son got whatever he wanted. When Gaur Mohan returned home at night, it was his practice to take a little puffed rice, and Abe would also sometimes sit with his father eating puffed rice. Once, at a cost of 6 rupees, Gaur Mohan brought Abe a pair of shoes imported from England, and each year, through a friend who traveled back and forth from Kashmir, Gaur Mohan would present to his son a Kashmiri shawl with a fancy hand sewn border. One day in the market, Abe saw a toy gun he wanted. His father said no, and Abe started to cry. All right, Gaur Mohan said, and he brought the gun. Then Abe wanted another gun. You already have one gun, his father said. Why do you want another one? One for each hand, Abe cried, and he lay down in the street kicking his feet. When Gaur Mohan agreed to get the second gun, Abe was pacified. Abe's mother, Rajni, was 30 years old when he was born. Like her husband, she came from a long established Gaudiya Vaishnav family. She was darker skinned than her husband, and whereas his disposition was cool, hers tended to be fiery. Abe saw his mother and father living together peacefully. No deep marital conflict or complicated dissatisfaction ever threatened home. Rajni was caste and religious minded, a model housewife in the traditional Vedic sense, dedicated, caring for her husband and children. Abe observed his mother's simple and touching attempt to ensure, by prayers, by vows, and even by rituals, that he continued to live. Whenever he was to go out, even to play, his mother, after dressing him, would put a drop of saliva on her finger and touch it to his forehead. Abe never knew the significance of this act, but because she was his mother, he stood submissively, like a dog with its master, while she did it. Like Gaur Mohan, Rajni treated Abe as the pet child, but whereas her husband expressed his love through leniency and plans for his son's spiritual success, she expressed her through attempts to safeguard Abe from all dangers, disease, and death. She once offered blood from her breast to one of the demigods with the supplication that Abe be protected on all sides from dangers. At Abe's birth, she had made a vow to eat with her left hand until the day her son would notice and ask her why she was eating with the wrong hand. One day, when little Abe actually asked, she immediately stopped. It had been just another prescription for his survival, for she thought that by the strength of her vow, he would continue to grow, at least until he asked her about the vow. Had he not asked, she would never again have eaten with her right hand, and according to her superstition, he would have gone on living protected by her vow. For his protection, she would put an iron bangle around his leg. His playmates asked him what it was, and Abhay self consciously went to his mother and demanded, "Open this bangle." When she said, "I will do it later," he began to cry. "No, now." Once Abhay swallowed a watermelon seed, and his friends told him it would grow in his stomach into a watermelon. He ran to his mother, who assured him he didn't have to worry. She would say a mantra to protect him. Srila Prabhupada said, Mother Yashoda would chant mantras in the morning to protect Krishna from all dangers throughout the day. When Krishna killed some demon, she thought it was due to her chanting. My mother would do similar things with me. His mother would often take him to the Ganges and personally bathe him. She also gave him a food supplement known as Horlicks. When he got dysentery, she cured it with hot puris and fried eggplant with salt. Though sometime when he was ill, Abe would show his obstinacy by refusing to take any medicine. But just as he was stubborn, his mother was determined, and she would forcibly administer medicine into his mouth, though sometimes it took three assistants to hold him down. Srila Prabhupada said, I was very naughty when I was a boy. I would break anything when I was angry. I would break the glass, hookah pipes, which my father kept to offer to guests. Once my father was trying to bathe me, and I refused and knocked my head on the ground, and blood came out. They came running and said, what are you doing? You shall kill the child. Abe was present when his mother observed the ceremony of Saddhahotra during the seventh and ninth month of her pregnancy. Freshly bathed, she would appear in new clothing along with her children and enjoy a feast of whatever food she desired, while her husband gave foods in charity to the local Brahmins who chanted mantras for the purification of the mother and coming child. Abe was completely dependent on his mother. Sometimes he would put his shirt on backwards and he would simply accept it without mentioning it. Although he was sometimes stubborn, he felt dependent on the guidance and reassurance of his mother. When he had to go to the privy, he would jump up and down besides her, down, holding her sari and saying, urine, mother, urine. Who's stopping you? She would ask. Yes, you can go. Only then, with her permission, would he go. Sometimes, in the intimacy of dependence, his mother became his foil. When he lost a baby tooth and, on her advice, placed it under a pillow that night, the tooth vanished and some money appeared. Abe gave the money to his mother for safekeeping, but later, when in their constant association she opposed him, he demanded, I want my money back. I will go away from home. Now you give me my money back. When Rajni wanted her hair braided, she would regularly ask her daughters, but if Abhay were present, he would insist on braiding it himself and would create such a disturbance that they would give it to him. Once he painted the bottoms of his feet red, in imitating the customs of women who painted their feet on festive occasions. His mother tried to dissuade him, saying it was not for children, but he insisted, no, I must do it. Abe was unwilling to go to school. Why should I go? He thought. I will play all day. When his mother complained to Gaur Mohan, Abe, sure that his father would be affectionate, said, no, I shall go tomorrow. All right, he, he will go tomorrow, said Gaur Mohan. That's all right. But the next morning, Abe complained that he was sick and his father indulged him. Rajni became upset because the boy would not go to school and she hired a man for 4 rupees to escort him there. The man, whose name was Damodar, would tie Abhay about the waist with a rope, a customary treatment, take him to school, and present him before his teacher. When Abhay would try to run away, Damodar would pick up and carry him in his arm. After being taken a few times by force, Abhay began to go on his own. Abhay proved an attentive, well behaved student, though sometimes he was naughty. Once, when the teacher pulled his ear, Abhay threw a kerosene lantern on the floor, accidentally catching a fire. In those days, any common villager, even if illiterate, could recite from the Ramayana, Mahabharata, or the Bhagavatam. Especially in the villages, everyone would assemble in the evening to hear from these scriptures. It was for this purpose that Abhay's family would sometimes go in the evening to his maternal uncle's house, about 10 miles away, where they would assemble and hear about the Lord's transcendental pastime. They would return home discussing and remembering them, and then go to bed and dream Ramayana, Mahabharata, and Bhagavatam. After his afternoon rest and bath, Abhay would often go to a neighbor's house and look at the black and white pictures in the Mahabharata. His grandmother asked him daily to read Mahabharata from a vernacular edition. Thus, by looking at pictures and reading with his grandmother, Abhay imbibed Mahabharata. In Abhay's childhood play, his younger sister Bhavatarani was often his assistant. Together, they would go to see Radha Govind's deities in the Malik's temple. In their play, whenever they encountered obstacles, they would pray to God for help. Please, Krishna, help us fly this kite. They would call as they ran along, trying to put their kite into flight. Abhay's toys included two guns, a wind up car, a cow that jumped when Abe squeezed the rubber bulb attached, and a dog with a mechanism that made it dance. The toy dog was from Dr. Bose, the family's physician, who gave it to him when treating a minor wound on Abe's side. Abe sometimes liked to pretend that he was a doctor, and to his friend he would administer medicine which was nothing more than dust. Abe was enamored with the Rath Yatra festival of Lord Jagannath held yearly in Calcutta. The biggest Calcutta Rath Yatra was the Malik's, with three separate carts bearing the deities of Jagannath, Baladev, Subhadra. Beginning from the Radha Govind temple, the carts would proceed down Harrison Road for a short distance and then return. Maliks would distribute large quantity of Lord Jagannath's prasadam on the public on this day. Rath Yatra was held in cities all over India, but original gigantic Rath Yatra attended each year by millions of pilgrims took place 300 miles south of Calcutta at Jagannath Puri. For centuries at Puri, three wooden carts 45 feet high had been towed by crowds along the 2 mile parade route in commemoration of one of Lord Krishna's eternal pastimes. Abe had heard how Lord Chaitanya himself, 400 years before, had danced and led ecstatic chanting of Hare Krishna at the Puri Rath Yatra festival. Abe would sometimes look at the railway timetable or ask about the fare to Vrindavan and Puri, thinking about how he would collect the money and go. Abe wanted to have his own cart and to perform his own Rath Yatra, and naturally he turned to his father for help. Gaur Mohan agreed, but there were difficulties. When he took his son to several carpenter shops, he found that he could not afford to have a cart made. On their way home, Abe began crying, and an old Bengali woman approached and asked him what the matter was. Gaur Mohan explained that the boy wanted a Rath Yatra cart, but they couldn't afford to have one made. Oh, I have a cart, the woman said, and she invited Gaur Mohan and Abhay to her place and showed them the cart. It looked old, but it was still operable, and it was just the right size. about 3 feet high. Gaur Mohan purchased it and helped to restore and decorate it. Father and son together constructed 16 supporting columns and placed a canopy on top, resembling as closely as possible the ones on the big carts at Puri. They also attached the traditional wooden horse and driver to the front of the cart. Abe insisted that it must look authentic. Gaur Mohan bought paints and Abhay personally painted the cart, copying the Puri original. His enthusiasm was great, and he became an insistent organizer of various aspects of the festival. But when he tried making fireworks for the occasion from a book that gave illustrated description of the process, Rajni intervened. Abhay engaged his playmates in helping him, especially his sister Bhavtarni, and he became their natural leader, responding to his entreaties. Amused mother in the neighborhood agreed to cook special preparation so that he could distribute the prasadam at his Rath Yatra festival. Like the festival at Puri, Abhay's Rath Yatra ran for 8 consecutive days. His family members gathered and the neighborhood children joined in a procession, pulling the cart, playing drums and kartalas, and chanting, wearing a dhoti and no shirt in the heat of summer. Abhay led the children in chanting Hare Krishna and in singing the appropriate Bengali bhajan Ki Kare Rai Kamalini. What are you doing, Srimati Radharani? Please come out and see. They are stealing your dearmost treasure, Krishna, the black gem. If the young girl only knew the young boy Krishna, treasure of her heart, is now forsaking her. Abe copied whatever he had seen at adult religious function, including dressing the deities, offering the deity food, offering arti with a ghee lamp and incense, and making prostrated obeisances. From Harrison Road, the procession entered the circular road inside the courtyard of Radha Govind temple and stood a while before the deities. Seeing the fun, Gaur Mohan's friends approached him. Why haven't you invited us? You're holding a big ceremony and you don't invite us? What is this? They are just children playing, his father replied. Oh, children playing? The men joke. You are depriving us by saying that this is only for children. While Abhay was ecstatically absorbed in the Rath Yatra procession, Gaur Mohan spent money for 8 consecutive days, and Rajni cooked various dishes to offer, along with flowers, to Lord Jagannath. Although everything Abhay did was imitation, his inspiration and steady drive for holding the festival were genuine. His spontaneous spirit sustained the 8 day children's festival, and each successive year brought a new festival which Abhay would observe in the same way. When Abhay was 6 years old, he asked his father for a deity of his own to worship. Since in infancy he had watched his father doing puja at home and had been regularly seeing the worship of Radha Govind and thinking, when will I be able to worship Krishna like this? Oh, on Abhay's request, his father purchased a pair of little Radha Krishna deity and gave them to him. From then on, whatever Abhay ate, he would first offer to Radha Krishna, and imitating his father and the priest of the Radha Govind, he would offer his deity a ghee lamp and put them to rest at night. Abhay and his sister Bhavatarni became dedicated worshippers of the little Radha Krishna deities, spending much of their time dressing and worshipping them and sometimes singing bhajans. Their brothers and sisters laughed, teasing Abhay and Bhavatarni by saying that because they were more interested in the deity than in their education, they would not live long. But Abe replied that they didn't care. Once a neighbor asked Abe's mother, "How old is your little son?" "He's 7," she said. As Abe listened with interest, he had never heard anyone discuss his age before, but now he understood for the first time. "I am 7." In addition to the education Abe received at the kindergarten, to which he had at first been forcibly dragged, he also received private tutoring at home. From his fifth year to his eighth, he learned to read Bengali and began learning Sanskrit. Then in 1904, when he was 8 years old, Abe entered the nearby Muttilal Seal Free School on the corner of Harrison and Central Roads. Muttilal was a boys' school established in 1842 by a wealthy Swarna Vanik Vaishnava. The building was stone, 2 stories, and surrounded by a stone wall. The teachers were Indian and the students were Bengali from local Swarna Vanik families. Dressed in their dhotis and kurtas, the boys would leave their mothers and fathers in the morning and walk together in the little groups, each boy carrying a few books and his tiffin inside the school. They would talk together and play until the clanging bell called them to their classes. The boys would enter the building, skipping through the halls, running up and down the stairs, coming out to the wide front veranda on the second floor until their teachers gathered them all before their wooden desks and benches for lessons in math, science, history, geography, and their own Vaishnava religion and culture. Classes were disciplined and formal. Each long bench held 4 boys who shared a common desk with 4 inkwells. If a boy were naughty, his teacher would order him to stand up on the bench. A Bengali reader the boy studied was the well known folk tales of Bengal, a collection of traditional Bengali folk tales, stories a grandmother would tell local children. Tales of witches, ghosts, tantric spirits, talking animals, saintly Brahmins, or sometimes wicked ones, heroic warriors, thieves, princes, spiritual renunciation, and virtuous marriage. In their daily walks to and from school, Abe and his friends came to recognize, at least from their childish viewpoint, all the people who regularly appeared in the Calcutta streets. The British superiors traveling about, usually in the horse drawn carriages, the hackney drivers, the bunghees who clean the street with straw, brooms, and even the local pickpockets and prostitutes who stood on the street corner. Abe turned 10 the same year the rails were laid for the electric tram on Harrison Road. He watched the workers lay the track, and when he first saw the trolley car's rod touching the overhead wire, it amazed him. He daydreamed of getting a stick, touching the wire himself, and running along by electricity. Although electric power was new in Calcutta and not widespread, only the wealthy could afford it in their homes. Along with the electric tram came the new electric street lights, carbon arc lamps, replacing the old gas lights. Abe and his friends used to go down the street looking on the ground for the old used carbon tips which the maintenance man would leave behind. When Abe saw his first gramophone box, he bought an electric man or a ghost was inside the box singing. Abe liked to ride his bicycle down the busy Calcutta streets. Although, when the soccer club had been formed at school, he had requested the position of a goalie so that he wouldn't have to run. He was an avid cyclist. A favorite ride was to go south towards Dalhousie Square with its large fountain spraying water into the air. That was near Raj Bhavan, the Viceroy's mansion, which Abhay would glimpse through the gates. Riding further south, he would pass through the open arch of the Maidan, Calcutta's main public park, with its beautiful flat land spanning out towards Chorangi and the stately buildings and the trees of the British quarters. The park also had exciting places to cycle past: racetrack, Fort William, the stadium. The Maidan bordered the Ganges, known locally as the Hooghly, and sometime Abe would cycle home along with his shows. Here he saw numerous bathing ghats with stone steps leading down into the Ganges, and often with temples at the top of the steps. There was the burning ghats where bodies were cremated, and close to his home, a pontoon bridge that crossed the river into the city of Howrah. At age 12, though it made no deep impression on him, Abhay was intimated by a professional guru. The guru told him about his own master, a great yogi, who had once asked him, "What do you want to eat?" Abhay's family guru had replied, "Fresh pomegranates from Afghanistan." "All right," the yogi had replied, "go into the next room." And there he had found a branch of pomegranates, ripe as if freshly taken from tree. The yogi who had come to see Abhay's father said that he had once sat down with his own master and touched him, and had then been transported within moments to the city of Dwarka by his yogic power. Gaur Mohan did not have a high opinion of Bengal's growing number of so-called sadhus, the non-devotional, impersonalists, philosophers, the demigod worshippers, the ganja smokers, the beggars, but he was so charitable that he would invite the charlatans into his home. Every day, Abe saw many so called sadhus as well as some who were genuine coming to eat in his home as guests of his father. And from their words and activities, Abe became aware of many things, including the existence of yogic power. At a circus, he and his father once saw a yogi tied up hand and foot and put into a bag. The bag was sealed and put into a box, which was then locked and sealed, but still the man came out. Abe, however, did not give these things much importance compared with the devotional activity his father had taught him, his worship of Radha Krishna and his observance of Rath Yatra. Hindus and Muslims lived peacefully together in Calcutta, and it was not unusual for them to attend one another's social and religious functions. They had their differences, but there had always been harmony. So when trouble started, Abe's family understood it to be due to political agitation by the British. Abe was about 13 years old when the first Hindu Muslim riot broke out. He did not understand exactly what it was, but somehow he found himself in the middle of it. Srila Prabhupada said, "All around our neighborhood on Harrison Road were Mohammedans. The Malik house and our house were respectable. Otherwise, it was surrounded by what is called Kasbah or Basti. So the rights was there, and I had gone to play. I did not know that the riot had been taking place in Market Square. I was coming home, and one of my class friends said, 'Don't go to your house. That side is rioting now.' We lived in Mohammedan quarter, and the fighting between the two parties was going on. But I thought maybe it was something like two gundas or hoodlums fighting. I had seen one gunda once stabbing another gunda, and I had seen pickpockets. They were our neighborhood men. So I thought it was like that. This is going on. But when I came to the crossing of Harrison Road and Holiday Street, I saw one shop being plundered. I was only a child, a boy. I thought, what is this happening? In the meantime, my family, my father and mother were at home, frightened, thinking the child has not come. They became so disturbed They came out of the home expecting where from the child will come. So, what could I do? When I saw the writing, I began to run towards our house, and one Mohammedan, he wanted to kill me. He took his knife and actually ran after me. But I passed somehow or other, I was saved. So, as I came running before our gate, my parents got back to their life. So, without speaking anything, I went to the bedroom, and it was in the winter. So, without saying anything, I laid down, wrapped myself with a quilt. Then later, I was rising from bed, questioning, is it ended? The riot has ended. When Abhay was 15, he was afflicted with beriberi, and his mother, who was also stricken regularly, had to rub a power of calcium chloride on his leg to reduce the swelling. Abhay soon recovered, and his mother, who had never stopped any of her duties, also recovered. But only a year later, at the age of 46, his mother suddenly died. Her passing away was an abrupt lowering of the curtain, ending the scenes, senses of his tender childhood. His mother's affectionate care, her prayers, mantras for his protection, her feeding and grooming him, her dutifully scolding him, her passing affected his sisters even more than him, though it certainly turned him more towards the affectionate care of his father. He was already 16, but now he was forced to grow up and prepare to enter his own worldly responsibilities. His father gave him solace. He instructed away that there was nothing for which to lament. The soul is eternal and everything happens by the will of Krishna. So he should have faith and depend upon Krishna. Abhay listened to his father and understood this. Hare Krishna. So we have ended the first chapter of the biography of Prabhupada. Please wait for the next episode, which will be chapter 2, College, Marriage, and Gandhi's Movement. Hare Krishna.